Hello, my name is Gudjon Bergmann, GB for short, and this is the podcast Coaching Nuggets and Insights. My guest in this episode is Coach Jana Guest, who specializes in helping people have tough conversations with loved ones. So welcome, Coach Jana. Before we get started, tell us how'd you get into coaching?
Well, I grew up in a regular American family, and like most kids, I wanted to express myself and kind of tell people how I felt about things. But unfortunately, I lived in a family where open communication really wasn't allowed. We pretty much did what we were told, and nothing was ever discussed. We weren't allowed to express our opinions or thoughts or anything that didn't agree exactly with our parents. So it was kind of like living in an emotional prison in a way. And we couldn't really get out of it until we left home. So I had a few ways of coping with that. One way was that I was a musician. I played the piano, and so that kept me sane. And another way is I kind of withdrew into my shell. I was kind of like a turtle for the first 18 years of my life until I moved out of my family home. Unfortunately, when I left home and I went to university, I didn't have very good communication skills. And on top of that, I was studying music as a major, which means you spend all of your time all alone in a little room with a piano, writing music and studying music and listening to music. And so my communication skills really didn't develop for another couple of decades after that. And at that point, I was divorced. I had 2 little kids. And I was trying to succeed as a real estate agent, which wasn't going very well. So I really needed something to work for my life. And I stumbled on a coaching course. And back then, coaching was just starting to become mainstream. And I was very, very interested in it, very curious about it. So I took the course. And it really opened me up to just how to relate to people, just how to talk to people and connect to people. And so for the first time, I started communicating for the first time in my life. And it was a very happy time in my life. And I knew I wanted to share this with other people who had perhaps gone through the same thing that I had gone through. And so I started coaching, and I found it very, very rewarding. It's really true that having beautiful relationships in your life makes your life more beautiful. And so now I have great relationships with my 2 kids who are grown now. And I have a closeness with them I never could have had with my parents. So now one of my ways of serving is to just help people have more connection and heartfelt communication with the people that they care about in their lives and who are important in their world.
Well, isn't that interesting, though, that a lot of the people I talk to, they have had some kind of pain or something that they weren't very good at, and then they find a way to improve on that, and then they feel like it's something that needs to be shared with the world. I mean, that's how I started. I quit smoking, and that's how I started teaching people, because, oh, hey, have you tried this? you know, have you tried not smoking? It's great. But it's interesting how you go from having difficulty with communication to becoming a communication coach, really. So where did you study, and what are kind of the main ideas that you use helping people have these tough communications and tough conversations that you had difficulty with when you were growing up, or weren't allowed, as you say, in your household?
Well, I studied with 2 groups. The first one was the Robbins Madonnas Training Center, which is the Tony Robbins official coaching school. And the other place that I trained is Coaching Institute in California. They are both outstanding schools. They have slightly different focuses, and I thought they complemented each other very, very well. So I use all of their strategies. Coaches use tools and strategies to help people access what's within them to make the changes that they desire in their life. And I've also developed some strategies of my own. I've learned that when you're maintaining relationships, you can look at it as kind of a beautiful tree that bears fruit. In order for a tree to bear fruit, you have to nourish it. It has to have nourishment from the soil, so you have to lay nice, rich soil. You have to water it. You have to maintain the tree itself, make sure that it doesn't get diseased or bugs taking over. And relationship is very much the same. So when you want to have a tough conversation with someone who's important to you, whether it's in your personal life or it's in your business life, there needs to be that soil first. It doesn't always come out of the blue. If it comes out of the blue, it's almost like you're talking to a stranger. And there are strategies for that too. But if you're talking about people who you love and who are close to you, then you've already laid a foundation.
Sometimes that foundation, though, is not as strong as you'd like it to be, right?
That's true. Sometimes it's not as strong as you'd like it to be.
No. And so so let's say you're having, because I like that tree analogy. Because it has many aspects to it. It's not just one thing. Just do this one thing and you have a great relationship. It's a multifaceted approach to improving the relationship. So what you're saying is that in order to have a tough conversation with someone, there has to be previous nourishment, or can you explain a little bit more about how that works?
Yes, it'll be much easier if you have already nourished the tree and it's a healthy tree that's been bearing fruit for a long time. Think about that. If you have a decent relationship with someone, it's going to be much easier to approach them with a tough, awkward subject than if you have not watered that tree for a long time and it's kind of emaciated. It's just barely surviving. It's going to be a lot harder to walk up to that person and talk about something that's tough.
How would you approach that? To say, okay, this is not a great relationship, but it is important to me. I need to have a tough conversation. But before I can do that, how do I nurture the soil here? How do I make things a little bit? Does that need to happen before the conversation or during the conversation, or how would you approach that?
It can happen during the conversation if it can't happen before, depending on your circumstances. So let's take that difficult situation where there hasn't been a lot of nourishment. It's been starved of water and nutrients. And you have to have this very important and tough conversation. The first thing that you want to express is that you're a trustworthy person. Trust is probably the most important element in any relationship. And the only reason that someone won't speak to you honestly and openly is because they don't trust you with their heart. They don't trust you with their feelings. So the first thing you have to do is build some trust. And one of the fastest way to do that is to be generous. That's one value that really nurtures a relationship, is to be generous. And the most valuable thing we have in our lives that we can give to another person is not even money. It's your time. You can always get more money. We print money, for God's sake. It's just paper. It's paper and rocks. There's always more money. But we have a finite amount of time. And if you can give of your time to a person, you would be very surprised at what a positive effect that will have on another person. Western civilization puts a very high premium on time. So let's be really specific. You have a difficult conversation. You're approaching a person who is close to you. This is a person who is a part of your life emotionally, a family member or a close family member. So I would start by giving them some of your time by simply speaking about something that you can both talk about. Could be a hobby, could be a family event or some event that's happening in your circle of friends. Just start talking to them. And what's really important is that you let them do all of the talking. This sounds very trivial as I'm explaining, but it's actually not. I would advise you to try this. Start a conversation with someone you care about and then just let them talk. And honestly, authentically, and deeply listen to them. Ask for clarification, maybe. Say, yes, I see, and nod. And do that for a solid 10 minutes without offering any of your own thoughts. And just watch what an effect that has on them. It's very, very rare that people do this. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It reminds me of the story of Dale Carnegie when he said he walks up to this woman and he just asked her questions. And then he walks away and she goes, "Oh, I've never met a nicer person than him." And all he did was listen. It's true. It's the lack of, I don't know, genuine presence. Just yeah, I mean, being able to be fully present with a person is a true gift, especially today when everybody's so distracted, right?
Yeah, that's right. And everyone believes that they're giving you some sort of privilege because they're even speaking to you. We're conditioned to look at ourselves that way as almost like vending machines in a way. So if you do the opposite of that, you'll make a big impact on the other person. And then when you follow that up with, there's something I need to talk to you about. Is this a good time? Because this is really important. And you'll probably have a positive response from the other person. Even if they realize that the last 10 minutes has been leading up to this, they'll still appreciate it.
That's a good point. Look, I'm in the middle of a transition myself with my son. He's turning 20 this year, and I'm learning how to be a different, parent of an adult. And one of the things we realized was that he lives at home still. He goes to community college here, and one of the things we were doing, we were always talking to him in passing, and he asked us one day, he said, "Dad, can you just, make time for me? And we just talk about it when we have time, when we have this space here." And just that question, is this a good time to talk to you? I think is so important because sometimes people just rush into, first of all, very few people would do that 10-minute pre-log, but they rush into the problem. They rush into, here's the thing, we need to talk about this, without asking, is this a good time? So I'm learning a lot in the process of transitioning to the parent of an adult. It's interesting.
I'm in that same position. I have a 24-year-old and a 20-year-old, and it's a very different job. It's a very interesting job in these times to parent someone that age.
So let's say you get them there, and you will have one of two reactions, right? You'll have, yes, I have time to talk now, or no, this is not a good time, or maybe the third reaction is resistance. I don't know if I want to talk about this. Can you give like little pointers on all three? Like, let's say, hey, green light, go. Yellow light, I'm not sure, or red light, not now.
Okay. Well, if the light is green, then go ahead and speak with them. If it's a yellow light, then respect their resistance there and ask them when would be a better time. I think it's really important to not try to force them and not even try to tie them down, depending on how important this conversation is. I think it's very caring to back away from someone and let them go. They know that you want to talk to them. Give them an opportunity to come back to you. depending on how important it is, you might have to approach them again, but give them a chance to come to you. Respect that they felt a little bit nervous. That helps build that trust. This isn't a one-shot conversation. This is a relationship.
Yeah, so it's allowing yourself to be patient, allowing yourself to stop pulling, stop pushing, right?
Exactly. And to build the trust by trusting them.
It reminds me of, there was a picture on the wall in a therapist office I went to when I was in my early 20s. And the top picture was of a farmer pulling a donkey, and the donkey was resisting, like really just pushing his feet into the ground and made a whole pile resisting. The second picture was of the farmer giving up, letting go, and the donkey just sitting on his butt and the farmer walking away. And the third picture was of the donkey following the farmer when he was walking away. When he stopped pulling, the donkey just followed him. And that, in relationships over the years, this one has kept coming up for me, is, sometimes I just have to let go of the reins and stop pulling people and see where that goes sometimes.
That's right. And it ties into something else that's very important about relationships, is that people have certain needs. So if the donkey sat down and then a minute later they followed the farmer, now what do you make of that? It could be that the donkey simply had the need to take the initiative. If the farmer's pulling them, then they're being forced. But if they do it themselves, then they've made the decision. And that can be the case with someone that you care about as well, especially if there's a power dynamic going on where they're older than you, so they have a sort of moral authority, or if it's a man or a woman and the man has some sort of authority and she's demanding that he talk to her, he may feel that he's just going to say no because that's the power dynamic between them. And he needs to feel like he's going to decide when the conversation happens. He's showing that he has a need, or we say in coaching, he has a need for significance. And so she has to respect that need. And some would say that she's, quote, giving in to him. I would say no, she's respecting his need for significance. Her ultimate goal is to have the conversation.
Well, and that's can we maybe back up a little bit here and talk about that, what you just said? What is the goal of the conversation? Is it just to have the conversation, or is there something else?
At that moment, the goal is to start the conversation, is to get the person to engage.
I ask that for a reason. I find that a lot of people enter conversations with an outcome in mind. Am I correct?
Yes.
Where they say, what I'm going to get out of this is I want this person to agree with me. I want this person to change their behavior. I want this person to, do this differently. But that can't be the goal if you want to have a good, tough conversation. It has to be to open up the conversation and see where it leads, right?
Most of the time I would say yes. It really depends. I can imagine a few situations where the person might have something in mind.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's the thing. I might have that in mind, but I first need to explore what the other person is thinking. And, so again, adult children, I may have my thoughts on how to, how to do things and what I want out of things and so on. But I found that if I don't listen first, if I don't hear what's going on, I'm not getting anywhere.
That's true, especially with young adults. Yes, kids. Let's look at a situation that's pretty intense. Let's go back to the couple, a man and a woman.
Okay.
let's say that he is speaking to her in a way that she doesn't approve of and that she feels she really can't support, that really has to change. She might she might have already decided that the outcome she wants is for this not to happen anymore. So she might want to listen to his side, but she's probably already decided that this really can't happen. So that's a situation that can be really, really tough, and a person has to decide, um, how important is this? How far am I willing to take this?
So it's really, if I'm trying to put myself in these situations and understand. So her goal is to set boundaries.
Exactly.
So her goal is to communicate the boundaries that she's setting, and that means that the other person needs to change their behavior. Versus, there can be a tough conversation where you just need to find out where somebody is. There can also be a tough conversation where you are not setting boundaries for yourself, but you're trying to change the other person without their approval, so to speak. So I think getting clear on the approach, clear on the why, that has to be uh, almost a first step. Like, I'm going to go into this conversation, and here's what I'm bringing into it. I'm going to set boundaries, I'm going to understand what's going on, or I really need this to change here. But then I find that the third one is always the least productive in my world, at least, is trying to understand, yes, setting boundaries, yes, getting somebody to change just because I want them to change. That rarely works, for me at least.
Right. Well, we're never going to really change a person, but you have to make that decision of how important it is to you.
Yeah. No, but I totally agree. There is a difference between this thing of setting boundaries versus just wanting somebody to change, even though it's not having an effect on you personally. I think there's a difference, as you said, in the power dynamic and so on, where when you are saying, I'm not good with this anymore, it is because of me, and that means either you have to change your behavior or this can't work anymore, or something like that, versus I need you to be this kind of person, and it's not for me, it's me trying to control you.
That is that's a completely different situation, yes. But the 10-minute prologue is just to start the conversation. The conversation itself, that's a completely different conversation.
Let me ask you this. If more people would simply do that 10-minute prologue as a part of their relationship dynamic with other people, that's like just an ongoing nurturing process.
That's right. That's generosity, which is a relationship value, which is a way of nurturing a relationship. Generosity. And generosity with your time is, like I said, the most valuable, but you can be generous with other things too, that have a wonderful effect.
Because I can imagine that if you only do this before you have tough conversations, your loved ones will catch on. And they'll go, oh, you're listening to me again. I know what that means.
Yes, that's a great observation.
Yeah.
The generosity is the watering of the tree.
Yeah.
It's the spreading of the mulch. It's the nurturing of the relationship. And it should happen all of the time. And it feels wonderful, by the way. And you can do it in such wonderful ways. You can let people have the last slice of pizza. You can watch their TV show tonight. Let them have the big umbrella instead of the little one that always turns inside out. There's so many wonderful ways that you can be generous that are small but still very meaningful. They really do have an impact.
That's a wonderful way to look at it. It's just be generous. Being generous with your attention, with your time, with your presence. That's a wonderful way to look at it. I really like that. Okay, so let's say you're in the tough conversation and things are not going well? Any guidelines there?
It depends on why it's not going well. It depends on what the actual conversation is. But I can.
Well, just give a few examples if you have any. That would be great.
Let's see. Let's say let's switch to a different power dynamic. Let's switch to a parent talking to a young child, say around 10 years old, or preteen, say, who wants to have some toy that all of their friends have. I think that comes up a lot in parenting these days with our materialistic society. And parents don't always want to buy everything for their kids. I know I was a parent who didn't like all of the, especially the electronic toys that my kids always wanted. So, how can you talk to a child who's demanding a toy that all their friends have and all of the other parents think is great? And there's even a dynamic among the parents. Do your kids have this? Are you buying this for your kids? There's this whole social dynamic. How do you handle that between you and your child? How do you communicate to your child that how do you get them to accept that they're not going to get the thing that's socially needed right now? So a rule of thumb is that when someone wants something, they want it because they're satisfying a need. And your job is to figure out what that need is. If you know this person, like your child, you can probably guess. There could be a lot of reasons why your child wants this toy. It could be because they want to belong. That's the obvious one. They want to belong. They want to belong with their friends. They want to be as they might want to be as good as someone else in the group. They might be competing, in which case they're looking for significance and importance. That's a different need. They could want the toy because they're bored, because they haven't had a new toy for a month and they need a new toy. As a parent, you need to figure out what that need is. If you think you know what it is, then you can do an object replacement, because it's really true that it's the need they want satisfied. It's the need, not the toy. Don't be fooled. Know what the need is. You might be able to satisfy it a different way. So if it's boredom, maybe there's a toy that you would approve of that you can suggest, and they might go, oh, that's cool, because it was boredom. And so you make them happy that way. And then you don't have to buy a toy that you think is a waste of your money. If it's belonging with the group of kids, perhaps you can think of a toy that would give them importance in that group, but a toy that you agree with. So you have to think in terms of whether their friends like, what could you suggest that both their friends and your child would like, that also you would like. So you have to get kind of creative. It takes some effort. Relationships take some effort. But you don't have to give in to every little fad toy that comes out if you don't agree with it.
Mm-hmm. Looking for the need.
Looking for the need is the key.
And really listening and being attentive to that. What if you're having a hard time discerning what the need is?
Then you should take a guess if you know your child.
Mm.
It could be simply love from your parent. Some kids think that other kids' parents love them more because they have more toys. Why? How come my parents don't buy me those toys? I must not be a good enough kid. If you know your child, you might sense that, and you might have your own way of expressing to them that toys are not how you express your love for them. You express it in these other ways, with these hobbies that we do, with these conversations that we have. We watch Netflix together.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's coming back to there are many ways to fulfill the need. And so even, and this can be applied when it's not a child as well, right?
Of course.
And so listening to what the person is expressing as a need for that moment that has to be something to keep in the back of your mind always when you're having these tough conversations.
Yes.
It reminds me, I went to see a mediator in Texas State down the road here, and he said, when I'm mediating, sometimes I just keep asking people, what is it that you actually want? Because sometimes people don't even ask that. So he gives the example of two kids come to their parent with the last orange in the house, and because they both want the orange. And the parent, not listening, just cuts the orange in two and gives them each a half. But if the parent would have asked, then one kid needed the bark and the other one needed the seed. So both could have gotten exactly what they wanted if the parent would have just asked.
Yes.
I think it's almost the same thing that you're talking about, isn't it? To dig, to listen, to find what it is that the person is actually saying, because it's not always just the words, right?
No, it's really not. You have to know the person. And if you don't know the person, say if it's a business relationship, then you have to ask questions like the mediator did.
This is so fascinating. And you have such a great presence. I'm really enjoying this conversation. Tell me, so who comes to you, and what are the most common tough conversations that you're helping people to have?
The toughest conversations that I've been dealing with are in the work environment. There are so many dynamics going on. There are hierarchies. There are mini hierarchies within work teams. There's the need to keep your job. There's the need to feel dignity at your job. While you, in any job, sometimes you have to endure things that you would rather not, because you have to maintain your job. But no one wants to feel like they're going to the job and being disrespected or even stepped on or used or manipulated. And so these are the toughest situations that I work with, is how to get along with colleagues who are very, very difficult, especially if they wield the power dynamics well.
Yeah. I can just imagine, or I don't need to imagine, I've watched it all around me where people, they really don't know how to, and they don't know when it's appropriate, and they don't, especially when it's, to a boss or to other people in the team and things like that. I just spoke to another coach who specializes in team coaching, and he said that the most important thing in a team is psychological safety. Right? So you get safety to express yourself without fear of retribution, without fear of ridicule, without fear of... is that something you talk about as well? Or
Yes, there's that trust.
Yeah.
Yes, I help people find ways to nurture that soil. It's not as easy in a work environment, but it can be done. And it's done in little pieces, little things that you say here and there, so that every day you're growing that tree, and people learn that you are trustworthy, that you give to them, and there are other values too. You can express caring. You can, what I call, face the truth in yourself. It's a way of confessing. You can show vulnerability. You can show that you accept them. There are so many different ways. You can make peace when things have gone wrong. There are so many things that you can do to create that soil of trust, so that when things get difficult, you have that foundation to work with. When you get together to be a team, to do a project, you've got that foundation that you can rely on.
Well, as you're speaking, I'm just thinking, well, this is like almost mandatory stuff that people should learn growing up. because this is most of life is relationships. Most of life is this, what you're talking about. And so since it's not in school, I'm glad they have access to somebody like you who can help them do that. Because again, this is huge. I mean, people talk about everything else that they know and everything else that they learn. But when it comes down to it, most problems in life, at least from what I've seen, are people problems, are relationship problems.
Yes.
And that can stem from difficulties in communications.
Yes. It's the beginning of everything, isn't it? Even globally.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I don't know what to say, but just thank you for coming on the podcast. And if people want to reach you, how can they do that?
The best thing to do if you want to speak to me is to email me. And my email address is S as in Sam, Coach Jana @gmail.
Excellent. I hope listeners do contact you. You have a wonderful presence, and I'm so thankful that you spent some time with me and our audience here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun.
Once again, my name is Gudjon Bergmann. To learn more about my approach to coaching, enter gbpersonalcoaching.com into your browser, and that will take you to my website. Thanks for listening. Be well.